This conference will now be recorded.
Suggestion would be, I didn't get you. He would be available, or he wouldn't
Just
be
me.
attending these calls. Oh, it's only you. All right, Mitch.
Yep.
Okay. So just to recap on our yesterday's session, let me quickly share the screen. We have designed a job for the file components. There we go. So just to recap, so basically we have done yesterday, like we extracted one file and we have added a column called date. So basically we had an input of this about in the columns like till the sale price, and the output we have added another extra column with the load date. So after the execution of the job, I think we stopped it. We haven't really looked at the file which was generated, right?
Right.
So this is the extract. So let's open that file and see. Okay, so the file is generated um, with the default date that we have set. So now that we have cleaned up the data with a dollar sign, showing us like this. So view, you remove the word wrap. Yeah. So in the job, we haven't mentioned like we have to include the header for the output. So that is the reason it did not generate the headers for this particular file. So let us generate the headers, and then we will go with another example, like how we can standardize the same schema throughout all the input files or the output files within our project or the workspace. So let us include the header, and the field separator is semicolon as we see. Okay, field separator is semicolon. Okay, then let's quickly run it. There we go. So similarly, what we can do is now we have from the input a flat file, we have generated another file with the delimiter change. This is as good as copying. But in order to convert this flat file to an Excel format, you can directly take an Excel file like T file output Excel, or you can say type in like you just say Excel. So you can write it to an output Excel. go there and it would have the properties. So if you want to write it as an XLS file, you don't have to check it this one, because this is over and above 2007 versions. If you want to save it in that format, you can enable this. So say whatever, let our Excel file be in day 3. New folder is day 3. So there you can say your file as sample extract dot xlsx. Okay. So this Excel file is, so if you want it, you can give the sheet, you can mention the sheet name here so that it would write it onto that sheet. And if you want to name that sheet, you could name that sheet here. Say we would include the header. So append it to an existing file if we have an existing file. And now we don't have the schema here. We have to define the schema. We already know that we have a schema here defined. But when you try to connect it to Excel, see what would happen. See the same main connection. If you try and connect it to Excel, say check on schema, it would copy all the schema here. Alternatively, you could, okay, 1 second. See, it has copied here. But in here, it did not mention anything like whether it's a integer, whether it's the data type is not defined as yet.
Okay.
So this is to auto size the column. So now that we have the first column, so as a header, so let us leave it as a string. But when we read it, we can read the appropriate columns as an integers or as the dates or anything that we like.
Okay.
So if you try and execute this job now, it would throw an error. It did not. Basically, it should throw an error, because you can try that example, because we have another unused component here.
Okay.
So this component is not connected to any of the input, and
Right.
we don't know when this component has to be triggered or when this has to be. So like if we have two jobs, like this is one sequence, and if we have another sequence like this, and we don't know which part should execute first.
Right.
So that is where your other connection types would come in. You have a trigger. This trigger would say that what are the steps that needs to be followed. On this subjob, okay, if you check it here, so this process would start running. Until this is completed, it wouldn't run. And if you say on, if you trigger it on this subjob error, only at the failure of this job, and this would, this would run. So that
Okay.
is basically like if else, and you have an explicit run if conditions. This run if condition is based on, it's a simple Java code that you can execute. So if this is succeeded, and if a certain value in this file is returning some value, then only this subjob would run. So if you click on this connection, it would open a Java code. One second. Component. There you can give the condition. It's basically a simple Java code that you can write. You can say that row one dot certain value. We'll go with an example for that one.
Okay, good.
And you have a trigger called on component OK. On component OK is something like, see, on the sub job is when we have accomplished so this entire block would consider it as a one sub job. So wherever you have the links. So if you
Okay,
have
yeah.
another link to here, yeah, so this is one particular sub job. So this would trigger, when I say this would trigger on, if I say on component OK, let me give another T file input or anything. If I say trigger on component OK, so the moment this component doesn't throw an error, in the sense if we have a file with this name, so this would trigger automatically, this subjob would trigger. It wouldn't wait for
Okay.
this entire subjob to process.
That'll go if it sees that that file exists.
Yes, if the file doesn't exist, then the subjob would go. So it really depends how you would want to design your job.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. So now that we have executed this job, let us see if it has created an Excel file in our day 3. Okay, there's a sample extract. There we go. So now what we would do is we would see how do we create the metadatas for our jobs. You understand by the word metadata, right?
Yep.
So, okay, so these are the metadatas for, like, if you want to create a database connection, you can create here and you can use it throughout all your projects. Sorry, throughout your project, not all the projects. For this particular project where we said like it's it's Talend flat files ETL.
Mm-hmm.
These are for the, so this metadata is for the file types, like your flat files. This is for the positional. This is for the regex, XMLs, and file Excel inputs. You could explore one by one on it. If you have any question on any of those components, yes, I'm ready to help on that one. So I would like you to go through those components once. It's basically all the components are same. When you come to create a metadata, the first and the foremost thing is we need to have a template in place. Say for
Okay.
instance, if I want to create a delimited file, I just can't say um, my sales data. If I say my sales data, it would ask me for a file path. Just one sec. Sorry, excuse me. Nana? Yeah. Hey, sorry about that. I couldn't take the call. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Okay. So what we need to have is we need to have a file in place. So the file format is on the Windows. If you're using it in Unix, it's a Unix. Or if it's a Mac, it's Mac. So Windows, you got to select the file that you want to use it as a as a template or as a once of as a once of template where you can define the structure for it. So day 2, we don't need a CSV. So extracted dot that, and this would show like this. So here we would say, what is the field separator? We mentioned the field separator is like semicolon and it's a delimited. Header, we define it here. It's the same properties as a file input component that we see. So the moment we
Yeah.
mention the header as one, the moment we have mentioned the header as one, it has given us column 0, column 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And
Hmm.
when we save, we set this header as the new column names and refresh the preview. You could see that. Uh, 1 second. Let us see. The header it has taken as 2 should be 1.
That looks better.
There you go. So yeah. So the segment, the country, the product. Now we can go say next, and we can name this as, we thought of naming what? My sales data. So it would copy the precision like from the file itself. If you want to change the length, so it has already calculated from the first 50 rows. So what is the maximum length of the segment? It has captured as 16. So we can update the lengths and the precisions and the data types here.
Hmm.
So you remember we have when we were loading this as a string. This
Right.
column itself we have taken it as a string, but when we are reading it here now, it automatically considered it as a date. So now we have a file delimited component which is already there. So uh, so all that we can do now is whenever we need this sales data, you can just drag and drop it. It would ask for whether it's an input file, whether it's an output file. Based on the same schema, these are the components that you can create.
Hmm.
Hmm. So we would say it as a T file input delimited. So by default, it would give that value of whatever the template that we have used, but we can use a different file name. Change it to the built-in property, and then you can start. So the schema is being called from the repository, but the property we are changing it, the file name or the file stream. So we can use a different file here, trimmed with the pipe. And similarly, we can say another output as my sales data with a T file output. Where is this T file output delimited? Am I not seeing it? Okay, sorry. new file out, and then you could connect it. So now you have a bit of familiarity on how do we work with the file inputs and the file outputs.
Yep.
So now let us take some sort of use cases and try to build up some sort of a story towards what we are doing. So the thing what you can do here is, if you the way you can comment it out is you don't have to delete it, but you can comment the code by saying right click, and you can say deactivate the subjob. So this part of the code is commented out.
Mm-hmm.
So let us look at our day 3 data, what we have, and see if we can make out a story of it. Okay. Now we have segments. Now we have country. We have product. We have discount band, which is nothing. We have units sold. We have manufacturing. Okay, we have loaded. So this is the data we're going to use. And now what we would say is we would like to see what are the number of units sold per segment. What are the units sold per segment, or per country, or per product? Or we can put a conditions like what are the units that are sold where the total quantity is more than 300 or 400, which are sold more than 1000.
Mm-hmm.
You got the point, right? Maybe
Yeah,
we could have,
definitely.
yeah. So let us take an example, like we have a segment here. So based on the segment, what we'll do is we'll do like 3 or 4 cases. Let us put it in a notepad. Total units sold per segment, country, and per country. Total units sold per country, and with a combination of both. Hmm? Total units sold per segment and country. So whenever we start saying total, max, minimum, we are talking about the aggregation, right?
Yep.
Hmm. So we have a component. We have a component called T aggregator. Shall we work with this Excel file, or shall we work with a flat file? It's up to you.
Let's just use the Excel file.
Okay. T file Excel input. No, it's not T file Excel. T Excel. T file input Excel. Okay. T file input Excel. So whenever you don't have, if you did not create any metadata, and if you want some information or the schema that has to be copied, you can go here. You would be able to select all and copy the schema here. You could
Mm-hmm.
actually copy and paste it. Copy, go on to another component, go on to another component, say edit schema, and you can literally paste it here.
Very nice.
So we have already that input component with that particular schema. So go to the desktop, go to our day 3 exercise. Is the sample extract. We have to give a sheet name. Give the sheet name as sheet 1. And now use the T aggregate component. It's already there. So it's a T aggregate row.
Mm-hmm.
All that you do is you do a main connection. And when you get into the aggregator component, it would ask you for a group by. So in here, in this component, we would we can select what are the components that are needed. Sorry, what are the elements from this particular file that are needed for us. So now we wanted to see in our report per country, what are the total units that are sold. Is per country, right? Or per segment? Let us do it with per segment first. Segment and the total units that are sold. So we can do a group by on the segment, and the output is the units sold. You can say the function as a minimum, maximum, or a sum. So this is the input column position. So this would take the values from here and it would generate an output file here. So if we say T file output delimited and you connect it, and this T file output delimited is on, let us save it on our D3 exercise. We call it as a sales by segment dot dat, and let our field separator be a pipe, and we would like to include our header. Here the thing is, we don't have to go to the file and see what it has populated. So in the day one, I told you about a component called tlog-row, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So this tlog-row would display in our console at the runtime.
Oh yeah.
So whatever, so from this output, you can directly give it onto the tlog-row. It has no impact on the process, but it would just throw out whatever has been written onto this component. Let us execute and see. I'm anticipating some sort of an issue on that aggregation because I'm not quite sure if the unit values have been defined as a float. On the government, we have segment enterprise, small business, mid-market, but there is no value populated for this unit value. Out of 700 rows, there are distinct 5 segments. Why we don't have any some of the unit values unsold? See, this is a string.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's the reason it couldn't make it a total sum. Normally in your enterprise edition, this wouldn't, it would definitely throw an error because you are trying to do an aggregation on a string. which
Right.
is, yeah. So this is a float. Where is this float? And I want this units to be as a float. Yes, that would change throughout. Yesterday, we looked at an option called throw an error if a file already existing. Let us uncheck
Mm-hmm.
that. Clear and run. We have the sum now. You could say in the console, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
That's pretty neat.
It's a, yeah. So this is the sum based on the market. Sorry, I mean based on the segment. So now let us do it the same scenario based on the country. What we can do if we have to replicate the same scenario, select all, copy and paste them,
Mm-hmm.
copy and paste them. Just go to our aggregator component, and instead of segment, you can go to edit schema, add the country. You can just add the country. If you click on these marks, everything would be copied here. So now we can delete the segment here.
Mm-hmm.
Now propagate the changes. Yes. So see this would, okay. So now the output column, what we are referring to group by is based on the country, and I want the input position of this column is country. If you give some other
Okay.
column, what it would do is it would aggregate on that particular product and it would show you as a country,
Gotcha.
which doesn't make sense. So the output column is, it doesn't mean that, so this doesn't mean that we are mapping a country from the input to the country to the output. It's not exactly like that.
Mm-hmm.
The actually mapping is done here. In
Okay.
our first example, it is auto mapped here directly. When you go on to your schema, so this is auto mapped.
Mm-hmm.
But coming to this case, we are actually mapping it. The output column name is country because it doesn't understand what we have written there. The talent would only understand what we ask her to remember. Like, so if we say do it on the segment, the output column will be populated as country, but your group by is basically done on the column called segment. The group by operation will be done on the wrong column. So that's the reason the mapping has to be defined correctly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now, now that we have set it up, clear, and say run, see what would have happened. It has overwritten the same file. They've got same 5 segments and 5 countries. Is that true? They've got only 5 segments and 5 countries. The examples. So it's 5 and 5. Okay. So always we got to remember saying that you have to trigger on a sub job, okay? Or alternatively, if you do this, this process would happen first and this would happen next.
Okay.
You could see that.
Yeah.
See, in this case, we have a same source that we are using.
Hmm.
When we have the same source, it is not advisable that we use the same source to read it multiple times. What we can do is we can replicate this file, this input using a component called treplicate. So let us do the same two operations just by saying treplicate. What treplicate would do is it would replicate any number of times that it is coming from the input. So we could replicate, no, 1 second, we got to delete this. We can go to treplicate component and we should always sync the columns, which is already done. If it is not done, we have to go back and just sync the columns. So row, it's a main, no, and replicate another main connection to here, no. Now you could see something different here. I'll show you. Uh, Nana, get my keyboard. Yeah. You could see this row 5 as an order 1 and row 8 and as order 2. So this means when it comes to treplicate, this branch would process first and later this branch would process later. This is as good as on subjob okay, the next process.
Okay.
So this is sales by segment and this is we have a sales by country. Sales by country. So now we had another case. We had another case like T aggregate component where we said we'll have a combination of country, segment, and then see what the sales are like. Go to edit schema and units sold. You can select them, move it to your right. We can add your group by columns as segment and country and your output columns to the units sold, and you wanted the sum of them. You could actually copy the component and paste it and tweak it as per your need. So sales by country and segment and segment. So it is showing your yellow mark here because we have copied from here, which has got only 2 columns, but we have aggregated here and we have 3 columns here in our output, and we have connected to a file where the schema is defined as 2 columns.
Mm.
So the best way is to click on it, and if you say sync columns, that warning message would go. So let's run the job. So there are 5 unique segments, there are 5 unique countries, but the combination of the segments or countries are like 25 records. So in altogether, we have 700 records in our source. And with our requirement of the kind of report that we wanted out of those 700 lines in the table or the file, so these are the 3 files that have been created. You could go to the files and check for those. So sales by country, you could see like the unit sold in Canada are so and so. Country and segment, you could see. For channel partners in United States is this one. You could also do the order by and the group by, sorry, the order by as well in the same components. Like if you want all the United States to be appear in the beginning and then it's in the alphabetical order, you can do that by sorting the rows. There's a component for that called a T-sort row. So for your example, you can do that. Any questions on this one? Or how do we use these aggregator components?
Could you show me how you would group it, like where it'd be one segment all at the top and the next segment, the next one, like you were just talking about?
You mean this by sorting it, right?
Yeah, like sorted
Adding
alphabetic something.
sorted alphabetic. Okay, that's fine. Uh, So, okay, let us not delete this. Okay, what you can, we have a T sort row. So these sorting rows are a bit heavy on the code. So the sorting rows, you can sync the columns. You can add segment is based on alpha, whether it's an ascending order or the descending order. And you could add another column, country, on your alpha. You could say it in a descending order and then connect it to your job and then quickly run it. Did I close it here? Okay, the job is done. So let's look at the data. It's yes, okay. So the first preference, we had this order by the channel partners. We have in an
Okay.
alphabetical order, right? And within this group, we have an alphabetical order in the descending based on the country. So it all depends on you how you wanted to list these items. So if you
Right.
want to list all the United States I mean like as a priority, what you can do is you can go to the T sort row component and just change the priority. Like you could move this priority to up. So then what it would do is it would put all the United States first and then it would put all the segments in an alphabetical order.
Cool. Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Hmm. So yes, okay. So it's all the United States have come in the beginning and then your your segments in your alphabetical order.
Very nice.
So, any questions, or is there any specific thing that you wanted to get out of this session? In the next session, we will start with so basically the T map component, where 90% of the ETL jobs are based on this T map thing, because you can say that T map is a superset of most of the components here in Talend. So,
Okay.
so we would start with
Yeah, I'm
that
probably just gonna
component.
take. Yeah, I'll take a look at your example from today, this afternoon, and then see if I have questions. I'll start with them tomorrow.
Okay. So if anything that's you feel that I've been missing, you can just let me know. If I bypass something, I might bypass something sometimes. So when I bypass something, you could just stop me there and get it clarified.
Okay, sounds good. I gotta drop off for another meeting here though, but thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, Mitch.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. Bye bye.